Greetings from Sweden and welcome to Everyday Mystic, an aid to your spiritual growth. My name is David, and today I want to talk about how our perception is being distorted and how I believe that there is a conscious intent behind this. And I believe that this is a very important thing to realize as we are going through our spiritual awakening. That there are forces that want to take hold of our minds, to govern our minds, to cloud our perspective so that we don't perceive reality as it is. Now, first of all, as you all know, in our normal everyday experience of reality, we are experiencing things through our five senses, and we have learned to identify with this experience, while we are really functioning on many different levels simultaneously. And we have these certain filters that we experience reality through. These filters cause us to experience what is called selective perception, where we filter out certain information that does not conform with our worldview, with our ideology, with our opinions, with our attitudes, and so on. And there is this thing called ideological possession. And when an ideology really takes hold of us, it clouds our ways of perceiving the world. It becomes, in a sense, like a fundamentalist religion. And I actually think that there are the same psychological mechanisms behind this. So what happens is, as I said, we filter out certain information. On the other hand, we can distort information so that it fits our worldview. We look at situations through a very narrow lens so that we interpret them in a certain way where we have, for example, an objective description of something, but we confuse the objective description with our interpretation of what is going on. When we engage in discussions with other people, we might not really hear what they are saying. Instead, we make a caricature of what they are saying so that it's easier to dismiss. This is the famous straw man that is often brought up, that is very easy to see when others do it, but it's much harder to see when we ourselves do it. And I want to bring up an example. And before I do, I know that this is quite a sensitive topic. There are a lot of emotions involved in this, but I think that it is one that is important to bring to the surface for a number of reasons. One is that I think it's an example of things that really cause division among the two main, you could say, groups in society, which are men and women. I don't think that I put this in as good way as I possibly could, but this was how it came out, so let's just run with it. You know what I mean. And this is that quite a few years ago I studied psychology at the university. And one of the things that we looked at was how the dynamics are in violence between intimate partners. And they had done these interviews with interns that had been abusive to their partners. And what they found was that the main motivator was to exercise dominance, exercise power. Here I felt the need to interject that this is not meant in any way to excuse this or any other type of violent behavior, but simply to show how the words we use to describe and frame a certain situation can have a very great impact on how the situation is being perceived. Implicitly, this was made as a statement of men's will to dominate women. But it didn't say anything about the real circumstances behind this. This was the assumption that was made. But what if there was other circumstances around it? Let's say, for example, that these perpetrators felt very powerless in general over their life situation, so that they tried to exercise whatever little power they could, which was usually in the home. I'm not saying that this is the case. I'm not saying that, definitely not saying that this was the case in all situations. I know that there are people that are very cold and calculating and exercise violence as a way to dominate in a cold and calculating way. But what if these are the exceptions? This is a possible reading of the studies, even though this was not brought up as an optional reading. And if this is the case, it suddenly frames the situation in a very different light. And what if this is the case with many other so-called facts that point to a certain way of interpreting the world? Now, what do I want to get at with this? Well, I believe that we always have our filters when we observe reality. There is basically no getting around that, at least as long as we are identified with this physical reality in the way that we are. But we need to become aware of this, both because we need to understand our own biases, our own distortions of reality, and try to counteract it as good as possible, but also because we need to understand the situation that we have found ourselves in. Because it's not just that this is how our minds operate, it's also that there are people on top of society today that know that this is how our minds operate and are using this knowledge to manipulate us. Now, I'm not going to get too much into detail about how this works, but I want to say this, that I will release a video on Saturday, which is a fully scripted video with this computerized voice that I'm using, that will explain this in more detail. So I hope that you will join me on Saturday and listen to this video, because this will explain what I'm talking about here in much more detail. This is an important video, I might add, I think. Because you will probably, I believe, understand things in a different light. And finally, I want to talk a little about Christianity and my Christian faith when it comes to this. Because the obvious objection when I'm talking about this is, what about Christianity? Isn't this just another lens that you filter reality through? And yes, in a sense it is. But whether this is a good or a bad thing depends on what you mean by Christianity. When I'm talking about Christianity, I'm talking about following Jesus. Trying to live as he lived and trying to follow his teachings. Everything else is secondary to that. And one of the most famous quotes from Jesus is, "The truth shall set you free." So if the Christian faith doesn't make one feel free, if it instead feels like a rule book that you have to follow so that God doesn't get angry at you, then I believe that you've gotten the Christian message wrong somehow. And also, Christianity has never been about condemning good people. Jesus only called out real hypocrites. When he met sinners, he understood them, he talked to them, he did not condemn them. So if Christianity is causing division between people, then I also believe that this could not be true Christianity either. And as I said before, we all have our filters that we view reality through. And I believe that there has never been a person that had a more clear perspective on reality and the human condition than Jesus had. So therefore, trying to view the world through the eyes of Jesus, which in a sense is trying to view the world through the eyes of God, I believe we could not have a better lens to view reality through than that. And then we have to figure out exactly what this means. But this is what I'm talking about when I'm talking about Christianity. Then there are a bunch of other things that we have to figure out as we go along. And that's it for today. If you like the video, please leave a like, leave a comment and share the video on social media and other places. Everything helps the channel to grow and the video to get spread on YouTube. And also, check out the comment section and the description for other things that me and my wife are doing. And if you haven't done so already, please subscribe to the channel. I put up new content every day. I do my best to always make it worthwhile. And other than that, just sincerely thank you for your time.